Welcome back, everyone. Me and the wife took a vacation to sunny San Carlos, so I was unable to put up a video sooner, but I wanted to put one up because I think this is a topic that's worth discussion and also worth looking at. But before I get into that, let's talk about the Mandela effect that I noticed when I got back from vacation. I had to buy cereal because we didn't have any food in the house. And when I went to buy Fruit Loops, there was F-R-O-O-T-L-O-O-P-S. And before I went on vacation, this used to be spelled F-R-U-I-T. And now it's back to F-R-O-O-T. And the reason I took note of it is because when I was a kid, it used to be F-R-O-O-T. Then they changed it to F-R-U, they spelled it out, fruit. And now it's back. So I'm assuming that whoever had the glitch, he's gone through his programming and has fixed it. Now, if you guys haven't looked at my prior videos, I've pretty much discussed that I'm under the impression that we are in a simulated reality. Now, I'm going to discuss that, but this is going to get into a little more detail about it. And the one thing I'm going to talk about is memory and dreams. And before I do that, I want to make a statement. The statement I'd like to make is your memories do not entirely reside in your brain. And I have evidence that will show you that this is more than likely true. The first piece of evidence is our brain is approximately 100 billion nerve cells, and that's the average human brain. If we deduce every nerve cell to binary code, in other words, X's and O's, a nerve cell can't really do much more than put out an electrical impulse, i.e. a binary signal, ones or zeros. So if we look at our brain cells, 100 billion of them in our head, and if we look at the average iMac, that has about 500 billion bytes of memory for memory, and more than that in computing. And you have vision cards, you have bus cards for internet, and a lot more. So if we look at our just average computer, it is more powerful than the human brain. Yet what does our brain do? Our brain controls vision processing. That's a huge task. That's an enormous task, especially what our brain does with that information. It identifies creatures, it identifies situations in our environment, it identifies climate, all kinds of stuff. And another function our brain has is inputs: taste, smell, hearing. All those things require lots of billions of megabytes of storage and processing power. Another thing is voluntary and involuntary reactions, also like a combination between the two. We have our lungs are both involuntary and voluntary. Our heart is involuntary. Our kidneys, our liver, everything requires inputs from the brain. So this is quite a sophisticated piece of machinery. And unless each nerve cell is capable of doing more than simply putting out an electrical impulse, it seems to me that it is impossible for us to have the computing power that we have and to remember all the things. I haven't even mentioned memory. Memory also takes up quite a bit of computing power and storage in the form of bytes. And if we're looking at each nerve cell as a byte, this becomes a physical impossibility. We just don't have enough in our brain to do what we do every day, not to mention art and the things that we create as human beings. So that is kind of evidence that maybe parts of what we have access to, the information we have access to, might exist elsewhere, similar to what we have in the internet with the iCloud. In other words, part of our storage when we start downloading songs and movies goes to the iCloud. And so we have this big storage thing that we access when we want it. And one of the things that kind of points to this is dreams. When you have a dream, you I believe, now, all the psychologists that I have talked to about dreams have always said that there are fears and your subconscious manifests an environment based on phobias and what you've experienced. But what if you have a dream and that dream is so far out from anything that you've experienced that you question that? You say, okay, how could this have come from me? I didn't experience anything like that in this life. And I did this. This happened to me about, well, let's look at the very start of my journal. What I did is every morning I would wake up and I would record my dream. And this one started, and the reason I did that is because I had something that was so off the wall that it just didn't seem to be explained by October 29th, 2007. Every day I would write down my dream when I wake up. I got so disciplined with this that during my dream, I would remember, or I would know what to ask when I saw something unusual. So when I'm dreaming, I do this so often that I know that if I see something unusual in a dream, the first thing, like if I see a person, the first thing I do is I look at that person. I say, okay, what color are his eyes? I need to remember this when I wake up. What's his name? How old is he? Where am I? And all these questions pay off because I started, as I built this journal, every day I would then write down exactly what it was I dreamt. Because in dreams, and this is something that all of you experience, a dream, even though it is this complex thing, this complex environment with characters and environments and situations, it is forgotten in literally hours after we wake up. How does something that complex just simply get erased from our head within hours? So if you want to know what it was that you experienced, you have to write it down. And the more you do it, the more disciplined you get with this, the more questions you'll know what to ask. You'll become a better witness of the dreams. Now, dream, like I said, is not entirely you. Some of them are. Like I said, when I write down a dream, I then try to relate to what happened that day and see if that explains the dream. That worked fine up until Saturday, February 7th, 2009. Let me recount my dream. Today I dreamt of a John Fitzgerald, and the year was 1811. He was a sharpshooter, open sights. Of course, I was open sights in the Marine Corps, and I was actually the company high sharpshooter, so this is something I kind of relate to. I dreamt his rifle was damaged during a gunfight, and he was rushed by the enemy and killed. So when I woke up, I Googled the name, John Fitzgerald, and it came up with a John Fitzgerald born in 1811, the exact year that I dreamt. He died in 1855 on the Google search. He was also a soldier, but that's all they wrote about him. They didn't write about the rifle jamming, but I'm assuming that that was a memory that he had, and that's probably how he was killed. And I dreamt that. This is a man that lived 100 years ago. Had nothing to do with me. Had I not asked the questions of who this man was, where am I didn't ask that. I wish I had. But had I not been disciplined enough to know what to observe during the dream, then this would have been lost. This would have been lost after a few hours after I woke up. So if dreams can be inserted or uploaded into our consciousness, maybe it's possible that the Mandela effect happened because a memory, and a memory I think is just simply a more advanced dream, was uploaded accidentally. Because here's the proof that we have, or here's what we experience in the Mandela effect. George W. Bush was asked what he thought about Nelson Mandela being president. His answer was, he's dead. My memory was also seeing the news broadcast that Mandela died. And it wasn't long after that, it was 6 months after that, when I was during my first semester in college, that people started talking about him as a prime minister. And I asked the same question. I was like, didn't he die just a little while ago? So that memory was shared by a lot of us, and also a president of the United States had the same memory as me. The other thing that I remember during that time, and I did a video on this if you want to look back, is about Mount Rushmore. Thomas Jefferson had lost his nose on Mount Rushmore. It cracked right around here, and most of the nose came off. Now, no, after I posted it, a couple of you have responded and had that same memory, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because for a while there, I thought I was the only one. I visited Mount Rushmore in around 2008, 2009, and I got into a heated argument with the park rangers and here's what I kind of gathered afterwards. The reason they were arguing with me is most likely because other people had asked him about the nose, and he remembered it a different way. So obviously he's getting very defensive, and he's thinking he's the brunt of a joke over and over. But that wasn't the case. It's just I had a different reality. I remember that nose falling off, and even the rubble down below. And if you look at my video, you'll see why, because I was in a flight simulator, and that depicted that during that time. So it is possible that our memories, or at least some of our consciousness, is uploaded from a larger computer. And this also kind of leads to another theory that I'm kind of getting to that might blow this whole notion away too, is that each one of us may be a nerve cell in a very large brain. And I know this doesn't really fit with anything, but bear with me for a second. Today, with the internet, with the iCloud, information is getting passed from an individual so fast that the minute someone creates something, it literally spreads across the globe. The same as what would happen in a brain. So we might need to also consider the fact that we are part of a larger organism, an organism that actually uses all these cells, which we are an individual cell, to run simulations of reality. And maybe that's what he's doing. He's going through, what would happen if Mandela died in prison? What reality would that place? Okay, he didn't like that, so he uploaded different memories, and then maybe we're the ones playing out that simulation. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating, but it seems like a lot's going on that we are only partially aware of. And again, our subconscious is 90% of us. We're only conscious really about 10% of the time. And one example of that, and I kind of noticed this, if you're driving down the highway, believe me, you're unconscious. Even though you're staying on the road, you're literally not operating on your conscious brain. And the reason I know this is if you're on cruise control and you start to come up behind a car that's traveling slower than you are, as you start to pass it, I can guarantee you that car will speed up. And I thought, okay, well, there's a bunch of yo-yos that don't know how to drive. Then I realized that I do the same thing. When someone starts to come up behind me, I start to speed up. So that's an unconscious reaction to the environment. I'm not even aware that I'm doing it. Even sometimes I will do it when I'm on cruise control, I'll even hit the accelerator, even though I'm on cruise control. And being aware of that allows me to change it. In other words, most of our decisions are made 70% emotional, about 30% logic. But we need to really get back to logical thinking, because if we don't, then we're going to just be carried on a path that could be dictated by someone else or something else. So lastly, what I want to kind of talk about is the theory. Now, this is Einstein's theory. So if you guys are familiar with relativity or anything like that, don't even, you don't have to listen to this. You can probably turn this off right now. But I want to talk about, because some of you talked about how time is dilated with gravity and velocity and whatnot, and you're absolutely right. But it also explains why you can't go back in time unless you started your velocity before. So when we look at dimensions, one dimension is obviously a point on a number line. That's all it can define, and number n, 10. It can just define one point on a number line. 2 dimensions, you start to get into shapes, but you can't define a solid object. In 3D, you can define cubes, circles, prisms, anything. The fourth dimension is time. So if we take an object and we stamp it, time stamp it, then we have 4 dimensions. So that is the first thing I need to discuss so that you understand this. Now, the theory of relativity is really simple. If you have, and what I do is to describe it is, if you can imagine a canyon with 2 mirrors, and here's a strobe light. So every time this strobe light hits, it sends a signal to this mirror, it bounces back, and it does this infinitely. But this is just, these canyons are really far apart. In other words, it takes this beam of light several minutes to get across. Now we have a little smiley face below the canyon, and he's observing the light going back and forth between the mirrors. At the same time, we have a bird traveling at half the speed of light. If anybody knows how fast the speed of light is, it's something on the order of 300 million kilometers per second. It's incredibly fast. You can't ever hope to achieve that speed. But if we try to picture it, here's what happens to time. So what the bird experiences, and it wouldn't matter if these mirrors are moving and the bird's standing still, or if the smiley face is standing still and the bird's moving over it. The smiley face guy sees the light beam go straight across the canyon, and the bird sees this. However, and like I said, the bird might be standing still and the mirrors are moving at constant velocity. So if you notice, this distance is much shorter than this distance. Einstein theory is that time is dilated to make up for the difference in distance between the 2 lines. In other words, the bird experiences time slower to allow this beam to travel the extra distance. So the bird is staying younger than the smiley face guy. So now this gets into dimensions. Here's the timeline. The bird experience now obviously these are like picoseconds, not real seconds, but in 2 seconds, the bird has only experienced this much life. At the same time, the smiley face guy is now older. Now, the only reason that the 2 can then again re-meet in the same dimension is because time cannot go back. If you ever want to go back before this moment in time, you have to start traveling very fast before the moment. And then the person who's traveling very fast is actually in the dilated time. He's in the slower time zone, and the person that's staying still will be the one who is in the future. But you cannot go back 100 million years unless you had the machine to start the velocity before. And that's just pure science. It just isn't going to happen. But it does relate to the fact that 2 people from 2 different dimensions can exist in the same time zone or in the same reality. So knowing that, I think that should debunk any theory that we're traveling back and forth in time. I believe that we are in a simulated reality. I don't believe in the different dimension theory. Yes, well, it's there, but it isn't really there as people have described it and we understand it. There's more evidence that we are actually in a simulation and that there's something that is uploading memories to us. And I think what happened with Mandela and Mount Rushmore is that some of the memories weren't uploaded to everyone. And we were and the people who remember Mandela dying, I think we were in another simulation. We were in a reality where the computer or whatever it is wanted to see what would happen if that had happened. And we were also in another reality where he wanted to see what would happen if nature took its course and the nose did fall off the granite monument in Mount Rushmore. But anyway, give me your thoughts on that, because I think this discussion is leading to that, and I can obviously change directions if there's a reason to, but I think this is pretty much where it's going. I think if we want to understand what's going on, we need to first acknowledge the fact that our memories cannot be fully trusted because they may be hijacked by something else. But anyway, until next time, thank you.